Good evening. Good, our mic is live. Thank you. Okay. Good evening again and welcome. My name is Barbara Altman and I'm the director of the Oregon Humanities Center, sponsor for tonight's presentation. I'm honored to introduce this evening Dr. Edward Tick, our 2008-2009 Tzedek Professor in the Humanities. We are partnered in bringing Dr. Tick here today by the Trauma Healing Project of Eugene. We are grateful to the many groups that have helped us host Dr. Tick here in Oregon. He held events in Medford and Ashland before coming to Eugene, and since his arrival in town has been meeting with student vets, counseling students, and other members of the UO community with almost no time to catch his breath. Dr. Tick, a practicing psychotherapist who has worked with veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, for more than 30 years, holds an MA in psychology and a PhD in communication. He is a clinical member and has held various positions with the American Academy of Psychotherapists and the American Holistic Medical Association, as well as numerous other professional organizations. He is also an ordained interfaith minister. Tick is the founder of Soldier's Heart, a nonprofit veterans advocacy and safe return program. His clinical practice and his work with Soldier's Heart are the basis for his recent book, War and the Soul, Healing Our Nation's Veterans from Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, which came out in 2005. The book has garnered much international attention and has won several prizes. With that kind of background and credentials, Dr. Tick is pretty much the perfect choice for our annual Tzedek Professorship in the Humanities. The endowment for this yearly lectureship was established in 1996 with a gift from David B. Stern and Nancy Guiteau. The title is a reference to the Hebrew word for righteousness or justice, and the professorship is intended to bring someone who is both a scholar and a practitioner, a thinker and a doer, someone who makes personal ethical responsibility to others the focus of his or her work. Edward Tick embodies the principles behind the endowment for this series especially well. What could be more human, righteous, and just than the reintegration of our veteran soldiers into the larger fabric of American society? There are a few practical details I wanted to tell you about. Dr. Tick's presentation includes some video clips that might be hard to watch, especially for those for whom the topic of PTSD hits close to home. Dr. Tick will alert us when the most sensitive footage is coming up. After the lecture, our speaker is prepared to take some questions from the audience. We would like to ask you, if you want to ask a question, to come down to the two microphones that are posted in the aisles. If you have mobility issues or can't get to the mic because of where you're seated, we have a wireless portable mic that a staff member will bring round to you. We need to ask you to use the mic because we're taping this lecture and the question and answer afterwards for future use, and we want to make sure that your voices come through loud and clear. I anticipate that there may be a lot of people who want to ask questions, so please be prepared to be brief. Afterwards, after the lecture, there will be a book sale and a book signing of Dr. Tick's work out in the lobby just outside of the room. And if our question and answer runs long, then we'll ask you perhaps just to join Dr. Tick out in the foyer once the room has cleared. I wanted to let you know that there will be Dr. Tick will lead us through a little ritual following the question and answer to bring the evening to a close. So before everybody leaves, perhaps you'd like to stay to hear how he wants to close the evening for us. You might want to watch the UO Today TV interview that I taped this afternoon with Dr. Tick and with another person to whom I'd like to introduce you, Dr. John Fisher. John, would you just wave your hand or rise? Thank you. Dr. Fisher. Dr. Fisher is a Vietnam vet who works with Soldier's Heart and is working with Dr. Tick on this swing through Oregon. That interview on UO Today will be broadcast in early March in our usual time slots. And if you want information on when and what channels those interviews are played, you can find them on the website for the Oregon Humanities Center. If you like this event and want to attend more of our programming, I invite you to add your name to the mailing list of the Oregon Humanities Center at the information table at the back of the room. Actually, it may be out in the hallway too. We'll see where that ends up. You can check our website anytime for a calendar of events. We also gratefully accept gifts at any time to support our public outreach events like this one, or our fellowship programs for U of O faculty and graduate students. Finally, before handing over to Dr. Tick, I would be remiss if I didn't deliver just a couple of more thank yous. My job as director is to put a public face on the center in our events, but the really hard work is done by others. My thanks, therefore, to the staff of the Oregon Humanities Center, to Peg Gearhart, who designed the striking poster, to Melissa Gustafson, who handled all of the practical arrangements, to Dylan Bragg and our friends and allies and family members who are here to help us run things this evening, and especially to Julia Hayden, our associate director, who heard of Edward Tick and had the wisdom to invite him and bring him as soon as we possibly could as this year's SEDEC lecturer to share his thought-provoking work with us here. So you've heard enough from me, and please, therefore, help me welcome Dr. Edward Tick.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Come on. All right, thank you. We have to be in this together. Before I start, I do want to reiterate just a few words. There will be 5 short DVD clips that I'm going to show through my presentation. I know and utterly respect and rejoice that there are some Vietnam veterans in the audience tonight. Welcome, brothers and sisters. 4 of the 5 clips are from Vietnam. I lead return journeys to Vietnam every year. I don't know who you are or what your comfort level is with seeing images of Vietnam today, but I want you to know that they're coming. Everybody here, none of the clips are of wartime. They are all of Vietnam now, in peace and working together with us for reconciliation and healing. But they are images of Vietnam today, and they may bring back feelings or images for some of you. One of the clips, it's about 3 minutes long, and it does show one of our veterans who went back to Vietnam with me going through profound degrees of his own grief and pain on his healing process. So this might be upsetting for some people, and it might bring some of your own difficult feelings from the past or the present to the surface. So please be aware, take good care of yourself, grab the hand of people next to you if you need to, talk to Dr. Fisher during the session or to me afterwards, and let's get through this together. The 5th video clip, you should also know in advance, I think. It's a general from the Liberian Civil War talking about his own experience of the horror of killing and the need to reconcile and apologize afterwards. So again, nothing vivid about war destruction, but much about the emotions after war. So please be prepared. I think that's all my business, so we can get to the important stuff. Well, I too want to thank all of you for attending. I want to thank everybody here who's given service of any and every kind. We will give a special welcome home to all of our veterans present. But first, I want to thank the University of Oregon, the Oregon Humanities Center, and Barbara and Julia and your entire staff for bringing me, inviting me to this wonderful facility and community, and for having the caring and the wisdom and the vision to bring the humanities out into public service, not just keep them academic pursuits, but we need the humanities. They help us be human, and you're doing a magnificent job in bridging the divide between academia and the real world and real world action. So thank you very much for bringing me and for the great work you do. And I also, again, want to thank Elaine Walters is here somewhere. Elaine? And the Trauma Healing Project also brought me here, partnering with the university to bring this work and to work together in the community to bring about healing for our veterans and families and preparation and training for the entire community to give our returning veterans, old and young, everything they need to be able to heal and come home. So thank you and bless you all for the great community you create and for having the caring and vision to do this work together. begin with a prayer from Sitting Bull, the great Lakota chief and warrior who was also a medicine man, a spiritual healer of the warriors in his society. Sitting Bull, as he was being initiated as the head chief of the Lakota people, sang this simple song. You tribes, behold me. The chiefs of old are gone. Myself, I shall take courage. You tribes, behold me. The chiefs of old are gone. Myself, I shall take courage. In warrior traditions, the worldwide, spirit was invoked at the beginning of ceremonies. War is so destructive and so deadly and causes such complex wounds. We cannot heal from war by ourselves and with our more ordinary human and psychological interventions. We need help from spirit. We need help from community. So Sitting Bull, we'll use Sitting Bull's song to evoke spirit and ask for divine help in giving us guidance and support in bringing the healing about. Sitting Bull also was honoring warriors and standing up as a warrior himself, helping to guide and lead his people and try to protect them from the threat, danger, and annihilation. You tribes, behold me. So in the Native American tradition and in other traditions, after we call spirit, then we honor our warriors, we welcome them home, we thank them, we thank you for giving service, giving sacrifice, being willing to sacrifice everything for us to protect and preserve the rest of us. So please, all veterans present from any war, any conflict, any time in the world, please stand up and let us behold you and thank you and honor you and welcome you home. Welcome home to you all. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice. Well, it's not only our veterans, of course, who endure the hardships of war and take its wounding and carry it through the life cycle. So I'm going to impose on you and ask our veterans to stand again for a moment. You'll be able to sit most of the evening, but okay, thank you. Okay, now I would like to please ask all partners and spouses of veterans to please stand. Thank you all also for your sacrifices. No, don't sit down yet. In a minute. All children of veterans and active duty people, please stand. Some of us may need to raise our hands for these categories. Will all parents of veterans and active duty people please stand? Siblings of veterans and active duty people please stand. Cousins, uncles, aunts, yeah. Friends and neighbors. Okay. Yeah. Teachers, clergy of veterans and active duty people, therapists, counselors, helpers, healers, supporters of active duty or veterans. Yeah. Have I left anybody out? Grandchildren? Yes, grandchildren, sure, thank you. Grandchildren of veterans, please stand. If anybody has been untouched by war, you're very lucky, bless you. Just please look around, everybody, and see every one of us is touched by war. Every one of us is affected by it. It's not just our veterans, it's especially our veterans, but it's our entire society and our entire world. So thank you all for all that you've given. In war, truth is the first casualty. The ancient Greek playwright Aeschylus said this 2,400 years ago, and it is echoed endlessly throughout innumerable wars since. It was spoken in the U.S. Senate by Senator Hiram Johnson, a young senator from California, at the beginning of World War I. Aeschylus fought at Marathon, where his brother was killed. Senator Johnson died in office the same day the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. They both knew. We all know that war hurts. We all know it destroys. We all hope it is only a last resort. All of us, especially our veterans, which wish that each war was the war to end all wars. So why is truth the first casualty? Last year, I lectured at Walter Reed Army Hospital. While there, I attended what they called the ritual of the arrival of the wounded. 3 times a week, new troops arrive from Iraq and Afghanistan, only out of combat for a few days. They're met by medical teams and chaplains who are all dressed in plastic against the profusion of blood. When troops return, 2 protests are staged just outside the hospital entry gates. One group carries signs reading, "Support our troops," and the other, "Bring our troops home." The groups scream at each other across the roadway. When the medical vans arrive, they scream at the wounded and staff inside. One group of protesters sincerely wants the war to end and believes it has been perpetrated by lies and its true costs hidden from the public. These troops are their evidence. The other group sincerely believes our nation is threatened by fanatic terrorists and that more attacks like 9/11 are imminent. These wounded troops are their evidence. The medical staff does their best to provide advanced medical care, and these troops are their patients. But they are overwhelmed by the numbers and degree of the wounded, and most of them have been in the combat zone themselves, and very many have post-traumatic stress disorder themselves, and it is exacerbated by this work. While modern medical care, as we know, keeps many severely wounded miraculously alive, I visited as a trauma expert because they do not have the resources, training, or experience to attend to war's comprehensive wounding. Some of the staff believe in and encourage the war for political or religious reasons. Others hate it. Once again, the wounded are their evidence. Among the wounded also, belief varies greatly. I killed or was wounded for my country, for my brothers in arms, for revenge because we were attacked, to stop the savages. Or I killed for a lie, I killed innocent people, I killed to make corporations rich, to save my own life. It was meaningless. Imagine these troops, arms and legs blown off, deafened, blinded, faces disfigured. Images of dead comrades and civilians in cities rattling in their brains. Nightmares taking up permanent residence in their sleep. Imagine this snake-like drive through groups of angry protesters as their first welcome home. Most of the wounded arrivals were strapped to gurneys and hooked up to machines. They looked exhausted or relieved or bewildered. One soldier was in severe shell shock, an acute phase of what we now call post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Imagine how these young people, whose lives will never be the same, how they feel now, sneaking between protesters, using their misfortune, hooked to machines, greeted and treated by strangers, life almost erased, and health ebbing away. The wounded had one more layer of trauma added on. For war's survivors can be wounded, as our veterans know, by the events on the home front as much or even more sometimes than the events on the battlefield. Perhaps the participant in this spectacle who most perceived the truth was the living ghost, the single shell-shocked soldier who just stared wide-eyed and could not form words or coherent thoughts enough to express the horror he had seen in the war zone and was now seeing here at home. Perhaps he saw his version of the ultimate vision presented in Joseph Conrad's novel, The Heart of Darkness, and echoed in the Vietnam movie, Apocalypse Now. The horror, the horror. It is with war as it is with the environment and with our nations around the planet. Post-traumatic stress disorder in humans and now in animals is akin to global warming for Mother Earth. All living systems are disordered and out of balance. All have been attacked. We live in an era of genocide and of Gaiacide. There is a horror stalking the planet that only a few can bear to see, and yet we must. I only have a short time this evening to speak with you about these most urgent matters. I could report on the vast numbers of physical, emotional, and spiritual casualties resulting from the present wars. At least 20 to 40% PTSD rate for all troops. Divorces, suicides, domestic violence skyrocketing. Thousands of wounds the public has not seen and for which society has no place. I could concentrate on the enormous healthcare costs necessary to provide returnees with the care they deserve. It costs over $1 million to maintain one single severely wounded soldier through the first stages of rehabilitation. The total healthcare costs for this entire generation of new soldiers is projected to be $2 trillion. We could concentrate on how badly we're failing to provide the necessary care. We all hear reports daily from all over the country about tragedies among despairing and unserviced veterans and their families. We could concentrate on the astronomical personal, social, and economic costs to our society, where large numbers of wounded and traumatized veterans return with debilitating conditions. Whether we consider criminal activity, suicide, homicide, domestic violence, substance abuse, we see that the major symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder are also the major social ills epidemic in our society. Does this mean that we all have post-traumatic stress disorder? Just as we understand that on our poisoned planet, we all have cancer, only some of us will manifest the final disease. And we could also list the millions of veterans who are unable to function at work, in the family, in marriage, who participate in violent or abusive or criminal or self-destructive behavior, who suffer with depression and other psychological syndromes, nightmares and sleep disorders, homelessness. We have suffered this epidemic of veterans' ills and despair before, and the losses to home, family, community, society before. One of war's truths. War abroad fosters violence, conflict, and turmoil at home. When we go to war, we inevitably bring its violence and horror back to our homes and to our streets. We cannot help it. War poisons the spirit, and we return tainted. That is why among many traditional cultures, including Native American, Zulu, ancient Israeli, and Buddhist cultures, returning warriors were separated for a time and put through significant rituals of purification and cleansing and restoration before being allowed to re-enter their families and their communities. As a veterans specialist, I receive emergency calls from active duty service people, new and older veterans, their chaplains, clergy, and therapists, wives and parents and children, every day and from all over the country. Some of these calls are from returnees on the verge of suicide. More than twice as many Vietnam veterans have committed suicide since the end of the war, over 100,000, while 58,000 were killed in the war. More than twice the number of suicides since the end of the war than were killed during the fighting, and more than 3 times the number of deaths from Agent Orange diseases since the end of the war than were killed during the war. The present suicide rate among active duty troops is the highest the Army and Marine Corps have ever recorded. Many older veterans from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and all our smaller wars have their own traumas reawakened and enter into new crises and despair. I've helped 80-year-old veterans apply for their post-traumatic stress disorder disability ratings for the first time. Many older veterans also honorably rush to welcome home and tend the newly wounded or to offer public witness. When we take a close and unprotected look, we see we are a nation and a planet of wounded survivors and their offspring and their neighbors. We must understand and respond to the full nature of post-traumatic stress disorder and the proper relationships between warriors and society. Only such understanding can enable our troops to come home and heal. Only then can we restore our damaged social order. Only then do we have a chance to bring peace to our nation and our planet. This is a difficult and a necessary message. War healing must accompany peacemaking, or our efforts will not take root. There is no contradiction between supporting our troops and working for peace. I've been working with veterans and survivors for 30 years. I began this work in the late 1970s before post-traumatic stress disorder was recognized as a modern diagnosis. I'm not a veteran myself, but this work was my service to my peers who had served in Vietnam, to our country, and to the people and country of Vietnam whom we owe so much. By now, I've worked with veterans of a dozen American wars and conflicts, as well as those from other countries and international conflicts. I will take the call to witness and heal from war anywhere on the planet I'm summoned. I have led 8 healing and reconciliation journeys back to Vietnam, taking veterans, their survivors, their family members, activists, professors, students, and others to the places we fought and harmed to practice reconciliation, friendship, forgiveness, and philanthropy. And now I would like to show you a brief scene from one of these journeys and how rebuilding Vietnam rebuilds Americans. We rebuild Vietnam and it helps us heal. We built this school in 2004. and we've been coming back ever since. We've entered into a lifelong family relationship with the people of this commune and with the children, and we work together to give them money and supplies, and in return, as we help them grow, they help us heal. When beautiful little Vietnamese children call our veterans uncles and aunts, it dissolves the former identity of the veteran, and he can grow into feeling good and positive about himself.
The children have been my salvation. It felt so healing for me just to play and let go and be in that playful spirit. It was wonderful.
Mr. Tiger?
We'll get to him. 2 of those 5 Vietnam veterans who were sitting in the children's circle chose not to have children because they didn't trust themselves with children after having fought in war. One veteran I brought back my last trip this past October. On that trip as well, 2 out of 4 veterans had chosen not to have children. This is another of the hidden costs of war. One of the veterans I brought back this year had not even touched a child since the war. And when we reached a street children's center in Da Nang, an enthusiastic young boy, an orphan boy, just ran up to him and jumped into his arms and hugged him around the neck and wouldn't let go until he returned the hugs. And our veteran now has a picture of that mounted on his wall, and the caption is, "When people ask me why I went back to Vietnam, this is the reason. It took me 37 years to learn to hold a child again." We wish, as the gospel says, the gospel song says, to study war no more. But there have been over 14,600 wars in the last 4,500 years of recorded history. War is so epidemic in its occurrence, devastating in its impact, and lasting in its aftermath that we must study it and heal it and treat it and tend to it. One man has a phobia of fire because his mother became pregnant during the London Blitzkrieg. One 18-year-old I worked with dreamed of his father's Vietnam battles without ever having heard the stories. Today, so many young American children are struggling or failing in school because their mommies and their daddies are far away at wars. Another truth: war inevitably infects entire families, communities, and echoes down the generations. Known or hidden, we all carry the wounds of war, and in our room, we all saw it when all of us stood. War healing work teaches that war is so complex and devastating in its impact that it does indeed destroy truth. For survivors, counseling and medicine may be helpful, but they alone are not enough to bring individual or collective healing. This work also teaches that it is intolerable and unacceptable that any civilized nation sends its young men and women off to war with the consequence that very many of them will never return home healthy in body, mind, heart, and spirit. Do we create sailors and soldiers and Marines to serve us when young, only to lose so many as productive civilians for the rest of their and our lives? There are matters regarding military service and its consequences that are truthful and that we have learned from all the wars of all times and all places. We must understand these matters together in order to successfully heal our service people and our country and our planet. Modern technological warfare is so overwhelming, painful, stressful, destructive, and deadly to our own troops, to troops from the other side, to civilians, the infrastructure of afflicted societies, and the earth itself, that almost no one emerges unscathed. All are transformed, many are broken for life. Warfare has, with its threat, stress, and destructiveness, has surpassed our human ability to adapt to its conditions without harm. Trauma is caused by troops' reception and treatment upon homecoming and in the ensuing years. If our veterans experience abandonment, betrayal, inadequate treatment, ignorance, or denial upon return, trauma results. Trauma also results from the moral, philosophical, and spiritual atmosphere of war. When we ask people to kill or die for a cause they find suspect, based on lies or do not believe in, trauma results. In both Vietnam and Iraq, troops said, and still say, it don't mean nothing. Your movie of your Ohio National Guard, This Is War, was terrifying in its display of the degree to which lives were lost or transformed without troops feeling any transcendent meaning. In such cases, trauma results. An adage today among troops in Iraq states, strive to serve honorably in a dishonorable cause. When troops feel this way, trauma results. When troops are motivated by revenge, mistrust leaders or officers, or believe they are fighting to enrich corporations, trauma results. There are inevitable moral and spiritual wounds during warfare. One human being killing another is the worst of these. And the worst of the worst, as Socrates said, is unjust killing. 90% of the casualties in Iraq are civilians. Trauma inevitably results. Our troops do not serve in the armed forces because they want to destroy or kill. They serve because they want to preserve and protect the country they love, its ideals, and especially their families, communities, and each other. If they must kill or be killed, they need transcendent reasons to do so. Throughout history, the only reason for fighting that has survived moral scrutiny is a direct attack with real, immediate threat to one's own and loved ones' food and land. In World War II, Vietnam, and around the globe, the most severe and greatest number of psychological breakdowns occur among attackers and invaders, regardless of damage done to defenders. Trauma is the tortured conscience of good people trying to do their best under conditions that dehumanize anyone. Ironically, though there was so much destruction and death in Vietnam, there is very little post-traumatic stress disorder. When people must fight, however sadly, without the moral ambiguity, truly believing they are immediately protecting their loved ones, they may be protected from trauma. And I would like you to witness a Vietnamese veteran speaking of this issue to our vets.
Mr. Tiger is a former VC, but he is not like any other VC. He fought in 3 different wars.
How old is Mr. Tiger?
Ông hỏi bác Tám năm nay bao nhiêu tuổi rồi?
87.
87. He fought the Japanese in 41, and he fought the French in 45, and he fought the American in 65. Okay, that's his life.
Boom, 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 boom.
Ông này là
Boom, 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 boom.
What would he say to an American veteran who still feels so bad about what he did?
Người Việt Nam chúng tôi
in his knowledge. He said there's no PTSD in Vietnam, no wounds for the soldiers in Vietnam. They fought only to protect their country. And that's why they have no problems after the war. And he said you suffer a lot of psychological problems after the war because you fought in another country, not to protect your country. And now the war is over. We are ready to make friends. No matter they are Americans or French or Japanese or everyone, to make friends and to make peace.
Dạ không, trước đây tôi ở trong cái
He was not a soldier, but during the Vietnam War, he was a secret agent.
Can you ask him a question for me? How can he forgive those who have hurt this country and hurt their people so much?
nhân dân Mỹ.
He said he and the Vietnamese people only hated the American imperialism, but not the American people, and not the American soldiers who only came here to do the duty. There's no forgiveness necessary because everyone was doing their duty. Bác Thắng ngồi chơi chứ? Dạ.
Chơi rượu.
He wants to get some wine.
He loves his wine. With 3 wars, I can understand.
Hòa bình. The process of creating a soldier is arduous and expensive. It entails not just training, but dehumanizing. One woman soldier at Fort Drum declared, "Our soldiers are trained killers and they don't scare." This soldier voiced rage, dehumanization, and hunger for revenge, all conditions that create trauma. But military service is supposed to build, not destroy men and women. A healthy society needs warriors and guardians of honor and maturity who restrain violence, who admit fear without being crippled by it. We do not have to dehumanize our troops in order to create good soldiers. And we spend almost no time, effort, or money to rehumanize them upon return. Short debriefings and arrays of medications to suppress the symptoms of pain and trauma cannot restore the hearts and souls of those who have seen combat and cannot recreate successful post-service identities. There is a necessary and proper reciprocal relationship between any society and its warriors. Our warriors willingly go into harm's way in order to preserve and protect the rest of us. In response, we must provide everything they need to return, recover, and be restored to full functioning and life. They gave all, so must we. For all these reasons, post-traumatic stress disorder is not just an individual psychological or medical pathology, and it cannot be healed through medical strategies alone. War wounds and distorts our thinking, our feeling, our perceiving, our aesthetics, our intimacy, our sexuality, our will, our concentration, our participation in society. Abraham Lincoln, whose 200th birthday we just honored, said in 1864 about the Civil War, "This war is eating my life out." Then how not to us and to our troops? How not to all of us? War wounds every function ever attributed to soul. As Socrates taught, the soul is the seat of our morality. Many veterans are anguished over what they have seen or done or what has been done to them abroad or at home. So, PTSD is a soul wound. The acronym could be translated as post-terror soul distress. PTSD also unfolds in the public sphere, just as much as in the private psychological one. In order to pursue war and keep the public supportive, governmental leaders and society in general deny the pain and suffering war causes and refuse to take responsibility for it. But in any healthy society, there is a proper reciprocal relationship between warriors and civilians. During threat and regardless of politics, warriors encircle and protect the rest of us. When they return, it is our responsibility to encircle and protect and tend them. Instead, today, our wounded and our veterans are shuffled out of view and their care left to experts or agencies who are understaffed and ill-equipped to respond. PTSD is a social disorder of any society that makes its veterans serve in dehumanizing conditions, then denies, alienates, and marginalizes them, their stories, experiences, and suffering upon return. In turn, society suffers and is disordered. The acronym PTSD could also be translated as post-traumatic social disorder. Sounds pretty bad. But it's not hopeless. We are not in a hopeless situation. Lifelong suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder is not inevitable, and our veterans ache for hope. When we understand PTSD as a moral, spiritual, and social disorder that we have forced our veterans to carry alone, then a path to home and healing becomes clear. When we listen to trauma's symptoms instead of deny or suppress them, we hear what we can do and what you can do at this college and in this community. So here is some of what trauma and PTSD asks us to do for our veterans. Find out who the vets in your community are and thank them and welcome them home, no matter what your feelings are about the wars they fought. Offer immediate response to any soldier or veteran crying out in unbearable pain. Create gathering places for veterans in every community. Give our returning service people a safe, tended period of supported isolation for their critically needed collapse, rest, and renewal. Create veterans councils to advise your community on veterans' needs. Create religious services that bring veterans spiritual cleansing and comfort. Restore the true meaning, respect, and celebration of Memorial and Veterans Days. Close the malls and let's gather in our communities and colleges and houses of worship and cemeteries instead. Create religious, educational, and therapeutic programs by which veterans can seek out not just psychological help, but spiritual healing, cleansing, and forgiveness. Create safe havens that are not only shelters for homeless or addicted vets, but are true houses of initiation where vets receive not just job and sobriety training, but education, therapy, and rehumanization processes. Invite veterans into schools and community centers to educate our young and the public on the realities of service and of war. Create genuine therapeutic opportunities for deep expression and release. Do not be afraid of veterans. Do not be afraid of the intensity of their feelings, but enter into a shared healing journey with them. This is the painful clip, and this is a brief glimpse of how entering into the shared journey and releasing the intense feelings can work.
Some of us came back dead. Some of us came back alive. Some of us came back with a little of each. And that would be me. I had death in me. I had death in me.
Terry needs to fully engage his feelings about the past and invite his heart and his soul to come back to him at the very places where he shut them down and left them behind.
Man, I can't believe all these bushes are here.
And it's up to God now. I just can't do anymore. Can't do anymore.
Try sad, not bad.
I am sad, not bad.
Sad.
I'm sad, not bad. I just had like a little kid idea that I could bring them all back. You know?
Yeah.
A childish idea.
No,
You know?
it was a wonderful idea. It was a wonderful idea.
Very honorable. Very honorable.
Both of you say, more came home because of me.
More came home because of me. Damn, look at his eyes. It's so funny. He knows it and I know it too. I mean, what are we saying this shit for? You know what I mean? I mean, it's so real, you know. You know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
More came home.
More came home because what was it?
Of me.
More came home because of me.
Yeah. Do it again.
More came home because of me. More came home because of me. More came home because of me. More came home because of me.
More came home because of me.
I know it. And you came home. You came home. You came home. I know. And you're the gift. You're the gift that came home. You're the gift that came home.
So I want to say goodbye to what was my identity. My identity. These pathetic little fucking pieces of metal, plastic. Pathetic.
More came home because of you.
Oh my goodness.
Get the B part, yeah.
He's doing great. He finished a master's degree. He's leading veterans writing groups. He's teaching, speaking to veterans groups now. He began completely numbed out. He couldn't feel a thing. We got him off medication. we opened his feelings again, then we went here. And that, for those of you who were there, that was Dak To. And that was the exact battle line he fought on. That might have been his very foxhole that he returned his dog tags to. Thank you. Bless you. So what else do we need to do? We can foster programs in libraries, community and cultural centers where veterans tell their stories to civilians, and civilians honor and help veterans. Your neighbors in Ashland just did that. They have a Welcome Home project where they had a retreat where dozens of veterans and their family members got together for 4 days, writing poems, writing stories, writing songs, and freeing their voice to tell their stories. And then in one of your Shakespeare Festival theaters, 600 community members came out to hear the veterans perform their stories for the first time. You're doing this right here. We need to create a Veterans Service Corps so that those who have faced life's ultimate tests can find meaningful ways to serve for life rather than collapse into meaninglessness and disability. We can pair elder warriors, elder veterans with new returnees, much as 12-step programs do, so that returnees never have to be alone with their nightmares and despair. We need to create 24/7 hotlines and drop-in centers so that veterans can find immediate help whenever needed. We need to create prison-based programs for the special needs of incarcerated vets. We need to evaluate veterans in the criminal justice system for the impact of military service upon criminal activities and treat them not like criminals, but differently, as people whose military service has inevitably led them astray and helped them find and guide and earn their way home. We need to create hospice programs for the special needs of terminally ill veterans and their families. And we need to create reconciliation programs with those we have previously fought, as you see here, and between veterans and civilians. We need to create restoration projects so that soldiers who had to destroy or kill can once again learn that they are good people who can preserve, create, and build. And I'd like to show you how such restoration happens.
I'm back. This is it, man. Look around. This is the real Vietnam. This is what I remember. I'm looking at that water buffalo and it just makes me think of what I used to do to those things.
I'd like to speak with you.
I tested the guns on them every day, every chance I had. Back in 71, 72, I flew over these fields. I took a lot of water buffalo's lives. And for that, I'm sorry, and I will make you.
Để rồi mình nghĩ trở lại cái tuổi già của mình để có thêm một sức khỏe chút nữa.
In life, everyone has made mistakes. You are not a single person. So he said that please forget about the past. And he said you have to take care of your health and make sure that you enjoy a good health in the rest of your life. But only be in that condition you can help the people poorer than you.
It's beautiful. He sounds like my wife.
That's baby Bobby. Bob, with your money, he bought one buffalo and one baby.
Amazing grace.
During that gifting ceremony, well, you saw Bob was written on the side of the water buffalo. That veteran's name is Bob. So there's a Buffalo Bob in Vietnam right now. And Bob then reached into his pocket and took out all the Vietnamese money, the dong that he had, and tried to give it to this poor farmer to feed and care for the buffalo. And the farmer said, "No, you've given me the buffalo. That's enough to restore my life. I never could have had one otherwise. But from now on, the buffalo is part of my family, and it's my responsibility to feed and care for him. And you are my brother forever. And when you come back to Vietnam, you must come to my home and live with my family and let me feed and thank you." In addition to restoration projects, we need to create community-based support systems for spouses and families of troops serving overseas. We need to create community-based support systems for newly returned veterans with and their families with preparation and training for living with trauma. We need to recognize and support other at-risk groups who go unrecognized, such as grandparents and fiancés and boy and girlfriends of overseas troops and of returnees. We need to teach veterans the arts and the humanities to give forms of creativity and emotional expression. The Celtic warriors and the samurai warriors all required it of their followers before they could become warriors. Our Senator Inoue from Hawaii, who was a World War II combat veteran and lost his arm in combat, became a one-armed master pianist. We need to evaluate our military and recreate our military training system so that we do not dehumanize our troops as we train and prepare them for soldiering. We need to encourage leaders, military and political, to take responsibility for the wounds and suffering that occurred on their watch. And we have a message, I hope, from a Liberian general of the Liberian Civil War about this very necessity.
So the whole thing is soldier, execute, and you have no other one. You want to definitely kill. So the whole military is about killing and killing and killing. A military man killing civilian. A military man engaging his friend. This thing has to stop. You are not a life giver. Why should one take life when they are not the life giver? You are not a giver of life. Why should you take it away? After the whole war, who have come out to say that we are responsible for these things? I'm responsible for these children. I am Major General Christian Wallo Peterson, to be exact, General Leper, who perpetrated evil within the war, who sent men on the battlefront and who did a lot of things to men on the battlefront. Who have come forth to tell society, look, soldiers, I am very sorry. So on behalf of everybody, on behalf of all generals, I've come forward to take the lead. I and Major General Leper have come forward to take the lead. I salute you, men and women in iron of every force, on behalf of all the generals in this country. I, Major General Leper, say, I am very sorry. So sorry and so sorry.
Major General Leopard committed atrocities during the Liberian Civil War, and he drafted and abused child soldiers, and I have seen him on his knees in tears asking for forgiveness, and now he dedicates his life to the reclamation and rehabilitation of those child soldiers. In addition to all this, and something we can especially do right here on a college campus, we need to train many more students, faculty, health and mental health workers in veterans psychology. We need to teach that it is different from normative civilian psychology and that they must apply different philosophies and methods in working with veterans. We need to educate professionals and the public to become familiar with the ways of war and warriors so that we overcome veterans' alienation and society's denial. We need to transform our use of the military from aggressive to preservative, from destruction to peacemaking. We need to put morality back in its core. Now, we could institute such programs for our service people and veterans and their loved ones. Truly, truly, there is a path home. I've worked with veterans, as you see, where we've made extraordinary efforts to bring about healing, and they have done extraordinary healing. Their nightmares and flashbacks and depressions are gone. They sleep like babies. They even need alarm clocks. Restoration is a goal toward which our veterans can and want to strive. This means functioning differently, not merely as a civilian, but as honorable, returned spiritual warriors and guardians. And we must not stop from our healing efforts until they are restored. We can and we must give them a warrior's journey home that works. Imagine Eugene, Oregon. Imagine our communities, our cities, our states and country becoming veteran-friendly. Imagine our veterans saying that here in my city, in my state and my country gave as much toward helping me heal and return as was spent on making me a soldier. Vets I take back to Vietnam feel like they came home there, not here. Imagine our veterans saying, in America, I can come home. By understanding this true holistic scope of trauma and providing our veterans all they need for post-traumatic growth, healing, and return, we could set a model for the nation and the entire world. We can restore the broken relationship between our society and its warriors. We can reduce the incalculable costs of war. We could help our veterans. We could help heal not just our veterans, but our entire society. We all know the proverb by now, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to heal a veteran. Wandering and wounded warriors need that village, wanting them and waiting and helping to receive them and heal them. If we are all that tribe, that village, that community, they will come home to us. Healing our veterans heals us all and restores that first casualty of war, the truth. We have time for questions, discussion, comments, stories. We have microphones. Thank you all very much. Thank you for caring, listening, and serving, and let's hear from you now for a while.
I want to say thank you. Thank you very much for caring. There's a lot of people in the system. I'm sure fellow veterans know you can tell when they're just doing it and when they actually care. and you care, and really, really touched me. I appreciate it. You had a figure, a statistic early in your speech about 90,000 Iraqi civilians dying.
90% of the casualties in Iraq are civilian casualties.
Okay. Now, does that mention intersectarian violence or U.S. military forces? Because I'm just saying there's obviously a tragic amount of death in the hundreds of thousands, close to 1 million.
Yes.
I think it's important to delineate because many soldiers are operating under such mental duress with rules of engagement and use for the rules of force that we're fearful for being incarcerated, let alone so.
Yes.
But other than that, thank you very much, sir.
You're very welcome. Thank you for serving. And your point is very important. I don't know statistics that differentiate how many civilians are killed by massive technological destruction, how many by insurgents, how many are used as human shields by one side or the other, how many are trapped in the rules of engagement, how many are killed as mistaken for insurgents. Do you have any information on that? I don't know if we know how to differentiate that. What we do know is that the death rate among civilians is that high, and that in all modern wars since the Civil War, that civilian death toll has increased such that by now, in most modern conflicts, most of the casualties are civilians, and the world, not America, the world has tolerated civilians, infrastructure, and the environment becoming the main targets during warfare. Do you have any information that can differentiate the casualties?
The most recent information I received was over 250,000 sectarian deaths. Other than that, I have no information concerning soldiers and, prosecutable crimes, so to speak. Very little. Although it is a very complicated war. The aspects of what your job is, the scope of your job, and the rules you have to operate within are great inanimate pressures. And, charging somebody with war in Iraq is like charging somebody with speeding at Indy 500, if I could borrow Apocalypse Now. So, I just thought, I misheard you. I thought you said 90,000. You say 90%. That sounds accurate. Thank you.
Thank you.
She was here first. Well, I wanted to say thank you too, and I also want to say that to many people in this community, I'm West Coast, owe Vietnam vets an apology. My son's father was assaulted and spit on when he came out of Travis Air Force Base by a peace sign, people with peace signs. He was actually hit with peace signs. And Steve Tice, who was the 1980s Vet Center director here, who later went to American Lake, which is a veterans hospital in Tacoma, he was called baby killer. He hadn't even seen any babies. He was on Hamburger Hill. He lost his shoulder, his arm, half his face. He hadn't seen any babies, and they were screaming baby killer. And then the 12th and 13th of January this year, my son came into my neighborhood. He's back, Obama's sending everybody to the mountains. But anyway, he's back in the desert or going to Pakistan, Iran mountains, Afghanistan, where 3,000 went this month. And that's not the SF guys, that's just the countables. And what did he see? He saw protest signs, my neighbor's protest signs. And on 5 connected streets, this and 4 connected, I'm the only one with little flags and a little pot of yellow flowers. The only one. The rest are all protest signs. And also, you have no idea the animosity against Nancy Pelosi, because she's trying to fight a politically correct war, and it's caused his friends and his brothers to be maimed, mutilated, blinded, crippled, and dead. You cannot fight a politically correct war in that. And also, like you said, under arrest, he had to go talk to the FBI in July in Kuwait because they were fired on 1st September, 2 Septembers ago. And there's a 7-year-old boy with an AK-47 and a woman with AK under her abaya or explosives. Those civilians, how can you know? And you need to take care of it and write your new president, write the Secretary of State, write the Speaker of the House. Well, we need to replace her, but anyway, thank you. I really thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm sorry that your family was hurt and abused. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to thank you, too, for acknowledging that many people suffer from the effects of war. My father was a prisoner of war in World War II in Germany. All of our family friends were POW families because they were the only people he could relate to and trust. All of them had what I call raging PTSD because they raged. All of the children I consider to be second-generation POWs. I hold the military responsible for helping to create this situation and then abandoning them and abandoning the families that came after them. I really worry about all of the families, the young families that are being created now by wounded veterans, and as you said, the families that are here at home while their mothers or their fathers are away, and then when their parents come back, the effect of their trauma on the relationships with each other and with their children.
Yes.
What can be done? It's generational, you know, the effects are generational. What can we do?
What can we do? I do happily say that the counseling psychology department at this very university is studying the problem and working on the problem and working on identifying ways to identify families that are at risk and intervening. There really is much we can do in addition to everything I said. Our school systems could investigate when children are troubled and at risk and failing or having attention problems or behavioral problems, to not just try to treat the child, but trace it back into the family and see what's going on with the family, and if present people are serving, or if there are veterans in the family, or if there are veterans in the family system going back several generations, and work to bring healing through family therapy and counseling and guidance to the entire family system. Rather than treat the individual problem, we, as you're rightly pointing out, we have to look at the family system and the family history and identify where the trauma was and treat everybody from the traumatized person through the entire system up to the most recently born member of that system. So it's very, very important that we have massive forms of education and intervention and support for the families, not just leave families, as you're rightly pointing out, alone carrying the problems themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brother.
Well, first of all, just to let you know that my daughter was taking care of those innocent victims over there when she was in Camp Warhorse in Iraq. And I am very proud to say that her and all the soldiers that worked in her triage did everything they could to make every one of those persons alive, live, and hopefully go away with the best care possible. And the Iraqi police, by the way, firsthand knowledge, has done a lot of the stuff to a lot of people over there, and not our soldiers. And so that's kind of a misunderstanding that's kind of been going on for a while, in my opinion, but that's not really why I'm here. In fact, that might be my daughter right now. I just want to know how to get my daughter back. You know, you're talking about post-traumatic stress, and you know, I had a daughter who I backpacked with and did spent countless hours talking and everything, and you know, I don't have a daughter anymore that you know, I got an email saying I love you for Valentine's Day, and that's it. I've lost a daughter to this war, and I'm not against the military. I understand, but I just am trying to figure out how to help my daughter get healed. She saw dead bodies on the operating table. She had bodies fall on her. She had soldiers who were put in to a room to die, only to find out that they, after several hours, they weren't dead yet. And then they try to revive them, only to basically say they have no life. So she saw a lot, and she says she's okay, and I know she's not. Where do I go? How do I get her that help? She supposedly sees a counselor. She's in Fort Lewis right now. She broke her back while in the service, so it's had some medical things happen to her too. But so I kind of was coming here to hope to maybe find some answers to that. I didn't really get it yet, and I know that there's a lot of hurting people out there, but I just kind of personally want my daughter back, and how do I go about doing that? And if you can give me names of people here or whatever. I know she's not comfortable coming to Eugene because of the anti-war. She grew up here, but she feels that she's not respected here by certain members of our community. But anyway, so if you could give me information on that, I'd appreciate it, email, whatever. So I'll just sit down.
Okay. Thank you for sharing your story, and I am and we are all grieving with you for this loss. You're asking a very, very, very difficult question. How do we help our service people and our veterans when they say they're okay and they tell us they don't want to be helped and to leave them alone? It's really difficult. There's an adage in counseling and therapy that, you know, we can't help people who don't want to be helped, and they have to come in and they have to ask for it. And so waiting and hoping and sending out messages and holding onto the lifeline like you are obviously doing is very difficult, and we never know if or when that's going to bring our loved ones home. I believe there's more than we can do. I was working with one woman whose fiance was in Iraq, and she asked a similar question. She said, I know my boyfriend is changing a lot, and he's got post-traumatic stress disorder. I know from his phone calls and his emails. So how can I help him when he comes back? How am I going to sleep next to him? How am I going to handle the nightmares? How should I talk to him? And after a while, and after working on this together, she said, I know what I have to do. I have to not try to save my boyfriend, but I have to talk to his parents and my parents and our mayor and our old school teachers and our librarian and our neighbors and get everybody so caring and so devoted to helping him come home that he's going to be surrounded by love and support and believe that it's okay to come home. I don't know your Eugene community intimately, and I don't know what it would take to help Eugene again feel like a safe, friendly place for your daughter to come home. But she's more than, she's horribly wounded and hurting from what she saw overseas. She's also wounded and hurting because she can't come back to her hometown. And so if some of what we discussed tonight happened here in the hometown, and if this place became more veteran-friendly and affirming, and if people who are anti-war did not become anti-troop, then that might help her come home and feel safe and get closer to you. Also, it is really important that we keep sending messages of love and support out to our loved ones. Sometimes books, sometimes movies, sometimes talking with other veterans. Sometimes they'll listen to those things and begin to wake up to how much they're hurting and find their ways back to us. So it's really important that you not give up hope, but keep sending out messages. Also, unfortunately, it sometimes takes years or decades. And some people, as the initial acute, intense phase of shock starts to wear off, and as unfortunately some life difficulties may show themselves along the way, then people sometimes start to realize, oh, I'm not as okay as I thought I was, and we need to be there to help them and to catch them when they hit bottom. So helping the community be veteran supportive, working with your family and friends to keep reaching out to them, trying to get other vets, maybe older vets, to talk to her and to reach out to her, and perhaps sending her good books or movies that you think might help her. Maybe she'll read a book about veterans when she won't talk about it to you directly herself. So all of these things are things you can try. Nothing is guaranteed, but don't give up hope, because some people do come home and it takes a long time. The path back from war is a lot longer and more difficult than the path to it. So I'm sorry, I grieve with you. Please try all of those things. And also, please get yourself support from other families who are in similar circumstances. All our communities need extensive family support networks to help you and other families like you with what you're going through. So don't just sit with it alone and think this is only about your daughter. It's about you. Your heart is crying. And it's about the rest of your family too. Get everybody support. Sorry. Yep, okay. Sure. These will be the last two questions or comments down here, and then I'll go out into the lobby and we can talk over books more informally.
Thank you. I am the wife of a retired military person. I did not wear the uniform, but I ironed one for 21 years, so I think I am a vet. I'm also a patient advocate at a VA hospital. I hear those stories. I've had them sit in my office and tell me that they became a monster over there in Iraq and they don't like who they've become. I've heard it all. I've seen the guys come in that are crack smoking, heroin shooting drunks from the river, and they're not treated with kindness because they come home and they don't trust the neighborhood anymore, or even the VA. I wanted to say that how much I appreciate all the things that you told us that we can do. We can write all the letters we want, but until each one of us extend the kindness and the understanding to those veterans and their families and their wives or their husbands, it's not going to do any good to write letters. The VA needs additional funding, no doubt, and those letters will do good. But what we need to do to build that community that you said is by just educating each other and extending the kindness and the understanding that they're wanting so bad to find in us and see in our eyes. And when we welcome them home, be that person that goes out there and welcomes the troops in. My son and I were lucky and we got to go to a VFW dinner for the National Guard out of Roseburg that it's leaving next month. What an honor that was to go and let them know that we support them and that the VA will be here for them when they come home. And it's only getting better. We have a complete service dedicated to OEF and the Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom that has case managers and patient advocates, and they will reach out to her. If you contact the VA hospital near where she's at, I'll be glad to give you my card after the lecture and help you find the person to get in touch with there, because there are people specially trained to help her. And letting her know that they understand and willing to help her will make a lot of difference to her. But once again, just if we find that community that does all those things that you said, I'm moving there. Thank you so much.
One second, please. Thank you. And yes, and we could move to that community, or we can strive, if we don't have the community yet, to create that community here. And what you said can lead the way in helping create that community right here. And you reminded me of something that might help our brother here. I'm sorry, I didn't register it when you spoke before until our friend spoke. Did you say your daughter was at Fort Lewis? Okay. See it? But she's still there. Okay. So I've been going to Seattle every year for the last 4 years and working on these ideas that we've been speaking about here tonight. And Seattle has been becoming a much more developed, veteran-supportive, very veteran-friendly community. So I can give you names of people in Seattle who are doing the very kinds of programming that I called for here. And so I can give you people to contact in Seattle, as our other friend here can, who can reach out to your daughter at Fort Lewis and tell her where in Seattle she can come, including older veteran groups who are working to reach out to the new vets and bring them in for safe places. So we can both give you contact information for your daughter. Thank you.
I just want to show you the back of my coat for a specific reason. This is a symbol of the local anti-war groups. It's a symbol that my own son, who's 21 years old, created. I'm one of the local peace organizers here, help create Friendly Neighbors for Peace, and I don't want to feel like I'm the enemy of you vets or your families. I myself am a survivor of domestic violence and had PTSD. And I see you returning vets as a source of great experience and wisdom and hope for our country. I don't see you as the perpetrators of the great crimes of the Bush regime. And I wanted to tell you that we are organizing another activity, a teach-in against the war for March 14th, and we're trying to do a fundraiser for local vet groups. And we're actually trying to make calls and make contact, and we've had trouble getting people to call us back because they're so busy. But if anyone wants to talk to me about that afterwards, that would be great. But my most precious experiences in life have actually come as a consequence of the insights that I've had from being a survivor of PTSD. And I think my insight was that there is no judgment. We cannot judge each other. We can only love each other. And I think we're just trying to do the best we can. And I am sorry that other peace activists have hurt you. And in their anger, they have struck the wrong people. But I just don't want you to judge us as not caring. Thank you.
Thank you. We can and must be utterly in support of peace and utterly in support of our troops and veterans and their families. Thank you. You're right. There's no contradiction. There's natural alliance because we all know the suffering and the horror that comes from war and violence. So thank you. And none of us are enemies. We are all friends, allies, and must support the same efforts. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would just like to end with a prayer. And this prayer certainly shows how veterans and peace activists are united in one cause that is much greater than all of us. This is a prayer that was written by a man named Hugh Scanlon, who is a Vietnam combat veteran. And he wrote it as part of his healing and the precious vision that he took out of his war experiences and his PTSD. So I'd like to end on this prayer so that we all leave together with a vision of love and hope and healing. O God, as I begin my walk out of the darkness and turmoil of conflict, give me the strength to find a lasting and gentle existence. Give me the desire to treat all living creatures with respect. Help me to do no harm for the remaining days of my life. May I accept who I am now, not who I have been in the past. Help me to remember and to dim, but not forget the tragic past. Take my experiences and teach me to use them to understand others wherever I go, to ban fear, hate, and violence from my thinking. Let me understand how one person can make the world a better place. Show me the reasons I am still here and what I am to do. Give me the strength to face the time I have left here to reconnect with humanity, to feel and give love. O God, make us whole again. Amen. Thank you. Bless you all.